Lu Shang put his hands into his pockets, and while his body was releasing martial fire, he began to fly through the sky toward the city. His eyes began to shine with seriousness. He extended his hand and fixed his attention, realizing that he could no longer continue gathering power. If he continued, he would completely exhaust the energy of heaven, earth, and nature of his planet, which would cause his world to fall into absolute silence. It was already night and the sky was full of stars. With a calm expression, Lu Shang began to contemplate the precious sky and sank into his thoughts. It was just as Lan Chen had said. The small blue planet could no longer contain him, and the vast stellar universe was going to be his stage from now on. Our boy closed his eyes and clenched his fist tightly. He didn't know if with the power he had now, he could destroy a planet with a single blow. He realized that he was still far from being able to destroy a planet, since a planet wasn't like an egg, where breaking the shell would make the liquid spill out. He knew that the inside of the planet was the most resistant part. His eyes widened with joy and his attention focused on his fist. He was getting carried away. He had just reached level 9 and was already thinking about destroying planets. At that moment, the voice of someone asking for help began to sound in his head. Lu Shang started to gaze toward the ground and his eyes widened in fear and confusion upon noticing that many voices were asking for help. He became curious to know what was happening. Lu Shang was able to see one of the cities that was being attacked by Igji's army. The ground was filled with corpses and a mother with tears in her eyes was hugging her daughter. Now that even the martial saints had been defeated, no one knew who would be able to save them. With faces full of fear and despair, the survivors opened their mouths and began to scream for help. Upon hearing this, Lu Shang's eyes widened in surprise and his jaw dropped in shock. Our boy closed his eyes and concentrated, causing blue martial energy to begin emerging from his body. He decided to activate his spiritual energy. Lu Shang's energy began expanding throughout the area, scanning all the terrain. Lu Shang was so strong that his energy began to expand throughout the country, until several seconds later, it covered the entire planet. He had planned to scan the whole planet using his spiritual energy. Somewhere else was Igji holding Zhang Yu, who was injured in the head. While Igji's eyes were shining with evil, with a smile, he extended his hand and revealed that the guardian gods in whom humans trusted were nothing but weaklings. Igji tightly grabbed Zhang Yu by the head. Her face was full of wounds and the mask she wore was broken. No matter how many times Igji experienced this sensation, it always made him enjoy it greatly. Igji opened his mouth and started laughing since he always found satisfaction in seeing how the natives of an inferior civilization trembled before an overwhelming power, with their faces full of fear. He approached Zhang Yu and with an evil smile, called the humans weak but stubborn. Zhang Yu, who was injured, did not say a single word. She knew she could do nothing. His eyes began to shine with rage because if it weren't for the bet he had with his two friends, he could continue enjoying destroying the planet for another month. He grabbed her head tightly and with a serious gaze decided to repeat it one last time, giving them the order to hand over all the planet's resources. His eyes filled with evil and a confident smile spread across his face as he made it clear that, otherwise, he would destroy all civilizations on the planet at a rate of 1 city per hour and kill everyone. Zhang Yu was so injured that she lost consciousness. Igji let go of her head and asked them to hurry up and bring all the planet's resources. Zhang Yu's body began to descend from the sky until it crashed into the ground. Igji mentioned that destroying civilizations was also a rather tedious and boring task. Zhang Yu's body collapsed forcefully against the ground, shattering it into pieces. Upon seeing this, everyone panicked, knowing they were doomed. Just then, a man began to point toward the sky and with a surprised expression asked everyone to look. They all raised their heads and began to look toward the sky, causing their eyes to widen in confusion and surprise. Their jaws dropped in shock since no one knew what was happening. Igji began to stare at them with a serious gaze and couldn't help but wonder why they were all looking at him. He didn't know if they were no longer afraid of dying. His eyes widened in fear and surprise, realizing that they weren't looking at him but were looking at something that was above his head. Just then, a powerful burst of martial energy began to descend from the sky toward Igji. He turned around and upon seeing this, his eyes filled with confusion, leaving him in shock. Igji's attention was fixed on it. He could not help but feel fear since he did not know what was happening. His eyes began to shine with surprise and his jaw dropped when realizing that it was not a burst of energy but a hand, a giant hand. A powerful martial hand made of golden energy appeared and began to descend toward Igji. Compared to it, Igji looked like an ant. He was confused as he did not know how it was possible for someone so powerful to exist on this planet. The finger of the martial spirit began to forcefully descend toward Igji as the attack was approaching. He put his arms over his head and with a furious gaze realized that the martial spirit was very powerful. He did not know who the user was. Using all his power, Igji tried to stop the attack. But his eyes widened in fear. He could not help but start screaming in rage since he wasn't even able to stop the attack. Several martial energies began to emerge from the hand, killing Igji instantly. Igji was furious since even at the moment of his death, he could not know who the user was. The attention of the Marshal of the West was fixed on the martial hand and his eyes were filled with surprise. He could not believe that Igji, a fierce and unstoppable alien invader, had died in an instant. The eyes of the Marshal of the Central District widened with joy. The martial hand had crushed Igji as if he were a mosquito. He did not know what had happened. The face of the other Marsical was filled with sweat and joy. He couldn't help but wonder if the gods really existed. But he quickly convinced himself that they did. He was sure that a deity had manifested. The Jade Emperor had not stood idly by and had come to save them. With a smile, the warriors raised their fists and began to celebrate Igji's death, and even though they had no idea what had happened, they were joyful. Jingyu, whose body was full of blood and wounds, sat on the ground and rested one hand on it, her attention fixed on the sky and her eyes filled with tears of happiness. She didn't know how the battle had ended so suddenly. She lifted her head and her eyes filled with curiosity. She did not know who had been the one who had killed Igji. In the sky a curtain of smoke formed and while it was disappearing, the figure of someone began to appear. Not long after, a warrior appeared and above him, a powerful fire phoenix began to flap its wings. The warrior clenched his fists and began to gaze toward the ground in silence. At first she thought he was a god, but then she realized that the silhouette was quite familiar. Her eyes widened in surprise and tears as she realized that it was Liu Shang. Our boy descended gracefully to the ground and began to walk toward her. With a serene expression, Liu Shang took her by the hands, began to look into her eyes and realized that she had suffered a lot. Jingyu remained silent, not knowing what to say. Liu Shang took her by the hand and helped her stand up. A group of injured warriors began walking toward them. The attention of the purple-haired man was fixed on Liu Shang, and his eyes filled with surprise. He could not believe that Liu Shang had killed Igji without knowing if he had reached level 9. In the Liu family mansion, the eyes of the sister who was watching TV widened in surprise. She put her hands over her mouth and asked if it really was Liu Shang. The attention of the parents who were standing behind focused on the TV, and their minds filled with curiosity. With a confused gaze, the mother put her hand over her mouth and couldn't help but sweat. She couldn't believe that Liu Shang was so great. The father's eyes widened in confusion and he couldn't help but be left open-mouthed. At the same time, Liu Shang's friend was also watching TV. She started to sweat upon seeing that Liu Shang had defeated Igji. The master, who had a beard and was sitting watching TV, began to stroke his beard and felt surprised upon seeing Liu Shang. Liu Kaiming clenched his fists and went into shock. He couldn't believe that Liu Shang was the god of war. With eyes shining with joy, Liu Shang extended his hands and with a smile apologized for arriving late, explaining that he had just come out of seclusion. All the warriors began to observe our boy in silence, not knowing what to say. Jingyu, who had her eyes closed, began to ponder. An enemy whom none of them, the martial saints, had been able to defeat had been crushed by Liu Shang without him even seeing it. She considered that absurd, too absurd, since not even the evil spear knew who had killed it. She wondered if Liu Shang was still human and if it was reasonable for someone who had just reached level 9 to be able to kill a peak level 10. She approached Liu Shang and with a curious gaze asked what height his martial spirit had. Upon hearing her voice, Liu Shang's attention focused on her and his eyes filled with surprise. Liu Shang extended his hand and with a serene gaze mentioned that he had not yet tried to fully unleash his martial spirit, because drawing power from the heavens and the earth was too immense and could destroy the foundations of the blue planet. He had to go with Lan Cheng to obtain more advanced resources before he could know. Jingyu stood up and remained silent. With a joyful gaze, the southern marshal raised his fist and declared that Liu Shang was the god of war and the savior of humanity. The central district marshal began to gaze at Liu Shang in silence. They had finally witnessed the birth of history, and according to them, Liu Shang was very powerful. The eyes of the black-haired man widened in confusion upon realizing that the handsome Liu Shang was none other than the legendary martial saint of Dragon Nation. Upon hearing this, everyone's attention turned to our boy. They all started running toward him. Seeing this, Liu Shang panicked. Everyone surrounded Liu Shang and raised their fists, saying that he was the strongest. Our boy's eyes filled with surprise. He didn't know what was happening. This is the end of the video. If you guys want to see the next part, then don't forget to subscribe and like the video.